In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 13. Today we're talking with Andrew Rasiej from New York City. He's a social technologist. He's been spreading the good word about technology for years. Ritesh, happy Friday to you, sir.
Hey, it's noon. It's Friday. You should have been there.
You should have been there. You should have been there.
How are you, my friend? Hope you had a good week.
Okay. I'm doing okay. It's I'm still in the home office, and
I see your post about the videos from the the extrovert, and I think you may have to create a whole book from that, or some sort of video library with all of them all on one channel, so everybody can go through the entire year.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do a little retrospective of like
there you go.
The days I couldn't remember the day of the week, which is essentially half of them. And it's good. So good to see you. Well, I'm really excited to have Andrew on. While you and I were being capitalist pigs on the commercial side of the internet, Andrew was, educating people about technology and trying to make, technology a more equitable thing. And
oh my gosh,
I think we have a lot to learn from him.
I think we may be educated today. Yes,
yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So we'll bring him on in a second. Just to get some stuff out of the way, if you want to see previous episodes, if you want to get audio podcasts, go to youshoulda.com. There's all the information about upcoming shows there, all that sort of stuff. If you're on
we have some exciting folks lined up, actually, don't we?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some really good shows coming up. I'm excited about what we have.
Me too. I think it's going to be great. Some of those people, I'm like, whoa, they're coming on. I'm going to be happy. This is wonderful. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Tom and Jason from At New York, and the guys from Earthweb, Murray and Nova, and so it's exciting, and we got some good ones. So that's exciting. So if you're here, you feel free to comment. Ritesh will be looking at those, and most importantly, I think we're up to 135 subscribers on YouTube. We need 150 for our vanity URL. So maybe we'll
come on, people. Where is the love? I mean, for God's sake, this is ridiculous. You know what? I'm going to have to strong arm some people and say, those black and white photos I have of you? If you don't like the YouTube page, I'm going to publish those pictures. I mean,
so subscribe to our YouTube channel. Damn it. All right, good. Let's bring Andrew on. Andrew Rasiej, fantastic to see you, sir. Thank you for joining the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Great to see
Andrew, you. Nice to see you. Love the hat. Love the hat.
The same, except for the glasses, I think.
Well, they're much thicker.
And I keep doing this a lot. I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah. It's it's the eyes are not good. The eyes are not good. Andrew, before we dive in, why don't you give us just a little bit of background about, like what you're up to these days? Just give us a little, quick little bio about what you're up to today, sure, and then we'll kind of dig into how you got here.
Thanks, Kyle. So I'm currently the CEO and founder of an organization called Civic Hall. Actually, the co-founder, to be honest, or more clear. It's an organization that focuses on the use of technology for the public good. It's a community facility that brings together people from the tech community, from nonprofits, from government, from academia, from the foundations, philanthropy, and to some degree from large tech companies and the corporate world to collaborate and work together on applying technology for the public good. We opened about 6 years ago. And quickly established ourselves in the Flatiron District as a collaborative workspace and a place for events. We've done over 2,500 events, bringing people together to talk about how technology is changing society, democracy, changing the way services are delivered by government, or how new services can be developed that make the world a more fair and equitable place.
Yep.
And 2 years ago, we actually won a bid from the city of New York to build a new building in Union Square which will open at the end of this year, which will house an 85,000 square foot version of Civic Hall.
Wow.
It will include 15 classrooms that will be used for digital skills training.
That's amazing.
Additional 20,000 square feet of collaborative workspace, a 250 person conference center, with the basic idea that any New Yorker would be able to get off the subway at Union Square, walk into our building, get digital skills training, and then hopefully get a job working in the tech industry and help make the tech industry more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible to people and populations that have been underrepresented and unserved over the last 20 years as technology has evolved and changed
Wow.
the world.
That's fantastic.
That is amazing. I think, Kyle, we might as well just give up now.
I know. I told you we
What
had
an
some big story
amazing,
here.
amazing endeavor. Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
So and I mean the through line for you has been that, I mean, you've been doing some version of this kind of work since I've known you. So, you know, we like to start at the beginning, as we say here. You know, talk about your origins, about, you know, your involvement with technology and what you did. You know, I think we met probably 95 or 96, fairly early in the game of the World Wide Web. But I know you were doing things before then. Like, how did you discover tech and get into it and realize this was your calling?
Thank you for asking, Kyle. It was a little bit of an accident. I was actually a capitalist for a while too. And
congratulations.
The first 10, you know, I lived in New York almost, you know, all of my life, but my adult life for sure. I went to school at Cooper Union. I studied architecture. After graduating from Cooper, I actually went into the real estate industry. I worked for 10 years in the real estate industry. I worked on the South Street Seaport project, the World Financial Center, and then I was about 32 years old. I decided that if I was going to go work for myself, I should do it now before I, you know, while I had the energy, and if it didn't work, I could go back to get a regular job. And so I started a consulting business giving real estate advice to nonprofit organizations. I'll get to why nonprofit organizations a little bit later, but I just saw there was a market opportunity that many nonprofit organizations were being given pieces of property and they didn't know anything about real estate, didn't know how to fix it, leverage it, or do stuff with it. So I started, you know, giving advice to schools and some hospitals and some veterans groups. And one of the veterans groups was a Polish Army Veterans Association that had an old theater on Irving Place called Irving Plaza. They used as their like clubhouse, like their VFW hall from in the 50s and 60s after World War II.
Amazing.
And the thing was falling apart, and they wanted to knock it down and build a new building. And they asked me to see if I could help. And the real estate market this was like in 87, 88. The real estate market was really not in great shape.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't actually build a new building. And so I gave them some advice and suggested, you know, I walked into this, it was a flat floored theater, like imagine a high school gymnasium, but instead of raked seating, a flat floor and a stage. And I realized that this would be an amazing place for concerts. So I convinced the veterans to let me start producing concerts out of the place.
That's right.
And I ended up basically becoming the founder of what is known in New York and in the music industry as Irving Plaza.
Yeah.
So I became a concert promoter. And actually, I knew nothing about the music industry. I mean, I love music. You know, I love music, and I went to my share of clubs and concerts when I was a kid, and actually was going even not as a kid, as an adult. But I didn't think of myself as a music impresario. Anyway, I found myself running this club, and maybe because I actually hadn't been in the music industry and didn't really know how it worked, I was always looking for some way of promoting the club or being competitive. In those days, if you wanted a concert to be advertised, you took out a strip ad in the Village Voice. Right. And hope that people would read it and come and buy tickets.
Yep.
And so in 1994, I got an email from a guy named Michael Dorff, who was a club owner of a club called the Knitting Factory.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he had gotten Macintosh, Apple, to give him $50,000 to start a festival in New York. There used to be something in New York called the New Music Seminar, which actually had gone defunct, and it was which was sort of like a South by Southwest for New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Michael
music. It was all music, right, Andrew? It was all just music based.
Just music, right? And so
they should have called it North by Northeast. It would have survived.
Yeah.
So there was sort of a desire to reconstitute it. So Michael asked, sent an email to like a dozen club owners, most of whom were competitive with each other, didn't talk to each other, and asked if anybody wanted to help. And I said, yeah, I'd love to help.
Right.
And so we got introduced. And so by 1995, we were experimenting with streaming live music, first through this festival, but then we started thinking about maybe building a business around live music, and we saw that it was early days. We knew that the music industry was going to be transformed by technology.
Mm-hmm.
We used to, I would laugh at whenever I heard record company executives talking about how people would always want to hold a physical CD. And,
yeah.
MP3s are just a fad.
Yeah.
The Tower Records would always be there. And so there was this kind of, excitement around the fact that the music industry was going to be transformed and make it more equitable for artists and others. So to answer your question, I needed to lay that groundwork because while I was running Irving Plaza, Rudy Giuliani was the mayor.
Oh yes, that's right. He had just become mayor. That's right.
And he wanted to Disneyfy New York City.
Yeah.
Right.
And he created this task force of different agencies to basically shut down all the nightclubs,
mm-hmm.
Or harass them into oblivion. And I was like, I had all my permits, I had all my licenses, everything was legal. But they would show up at 10 o'clock in the middle of a concert and tell us to turn on the lights, turn off the music, and make us show all our permits, and then do an inspection.
Oh, wow!
And this kind of harassment was happening, and I was all of a sudden realized that part of my job to make this thing successful was that I needed to be, engaged in the community and talking to people.
Yeah.
And I was always giving, in those days, I met neighbors. This building was empty for a while, so all of a sudden there would be people going to concerts. I would give people my beeper number. There was no
beeper. Oh my god!
Beeper number, and ask them to, like, if you have a problem, call me. Like, anything, you see anything, call me. And I almost never got a call because I was accessible. A lot of times clubs would, shut their doors and between 8 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock at night, anybody walking by wouldn't see anybody. I was available all the time, so I didn't really. I started becoming friends with people in my community, and there was a public school across the street called Washington Irving High School that had 95% of the kids were on school lunch, which meant that they were, for the most part, poor, and there was a business group that had been formed in the community to go into that school to try to kind of help out in any way possible. And I walked into that school as part of a tour and discovered that there were no computers anywhere in the school, not one. There was a Wang word processor on the principal's assistant's desk.
Don't knock that. That was my first computer here. I learned that Wang thing inside out and backwards. It was fantastic.
And this was 1996.
Amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Died in the 80s. I mean, I think the last Wang thing was 89 or something.
And so, right? So the light bulb went off in my head. Like, I was across the street. By 1997, we were streaming live concerts. We were getting emails from people in Singapore saying, "Hey, man, I feel like I'm club hopping in New York."
Wow.
There was something called.
Was that Andrew? Andrew, the streaming business, that was Digital Club Network. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. So as a result of the festival running for 3 or 4 years, Michael and I and Ted Worth, who ran a website called Total New York, which eventually got bought by AOL.
Oh, right, sure.
Started a digital, we started a digital music company called Digital Club Network, and we wired 50 clubs across the United States, and started, webcasting. We called it cybercasting in those days. Webcasting.
Oh, that's right.
We didn't call it streaming. Concerts and recording them. Actually, we were building a live music library of early recordings of artists like John Legend and the Strokes and others who had not yet been signed and were just beginning their careers. And so I was in the middle of building that business, or trying to build that business, raising money, and I was part of the New York tech community, which, if you remember, the New York New Media Association.
Yeah, sure.
Kyle and CyberSuds and pseudo networks and the parties and the gatherings, and there was all this excitement around the New York tech community.
Yeah.
And I knew that was happening, and I walked into this school and I saw 3,000 kids and not a single computer, and I realized, holy shit, these kids are frankly my future customers and my future employees, and nobody's thinking about how to get them online.
Interesting.
So I sent an email to 10 friends asking them if they would help me build a computer lab in this school. I called Verizon. I ordered up a T1 line, which at the time was like $6,000, which was a lot of money for a club to spend. I wired up the school. I found a bunch of used computers, and we sent a message to Kyle, I see. I think you guys are having some trouble seeing my image. Is my computer giving you a hard time?
Yeah, it looks like your computer's not happy with this.
Let me try going to my phone. Hold on.
Yeah, see if you can click on the link in the phone, and you should be able to use your phone, and we can swap out the video feed.
Here I am. Hold on. Let me put my name in.
Hold, please. We're having some technical.
Technical. Well, yeah, you dealt with live stream.
Yeah, the internet's going to be big one day.
Yeah.
What? There you go.
Flip your phone sideways if you can. Yeah,
there you go.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Amazing.
Okay, so where was I? So I sent an email to 10 of my friends asking them if they would help me wire the school up, and we got a T1 line installed, and to my surprise, about 200 people showed up on a Saturday to help with this project.
And was it all volunteers, Andrew?
They're all volunteers.
Wow.
And I realized that at that very moment that this issue was not one that was just something that I was thinking about. A lot of other people were thinking about. So I formed an organization called M.O.U.S.E. Cecilia Paglinowen, who was one of the entrepreneurs in the tech community, came up with the name. It stood for Making Opportunities for Upgrading Schools and Education.
Oh, that's great.
And we launched a wiring program, and we wired up about 75 schools, public schools in New York. And
so did you have to get the telephone companies to partner with you on this?
Well, we tried. They didn't really want to spend a lot of money doing that.
No,
they didn't,
that's right.
They still actually, that issue still exists.
Yeah.
We were trying to bridge the digital divide, and we'll get to the digital divide today in a second. But the challenge, in those days, Al Gore would consider a school a wired school if it had one teacher with an AOL account.
Oh, wow.
It was that, those were the days.
Wow.
They were called, and there would be these things called net days, which was like, to create awareness around getting public schools wired. Anyway, M.O.U.S.E, after about 3 years, M.O.U.S.E, managed to raise a bunch of money. We formed, a 501c3, got the thing off the ground, and we ended up developing a program where we started training the kids to wire the schools themselves, because there weren't enough adults to do it, and enough people in public education, teachers or others, to do it. And M.O.U.S.E now is in, I think, about 20 countries around the world. operating in 10 states. It's still very active in about 150 schools in New York. It actually has spent the last year training teachers how to do Zoom, get on Zoom and do virtual.
Yeah. What's old is new again, I guess, right?
Right.
Make sure everyone's
so the reason why that story is connected to your question, maybe I should stop talking.
No, this is really fascinating.
Is that all of a sudden we realized that my passion was really about equity and inclusion, and so even though I was still running Digital Club Network, I was spending a significant amount of time trying to help build M.O.U.S E, and I got really interested at the intersection of not just technology and music, but technology and public affairs, or technology and the public good. I started spending a lot of time talking to politicians, elected officials. I taught Hillary Clinton how to send her first email. Believe it or not, I unfortunately did not teach her how to delete them. It didn't occur to me at the time that I should have.
I know. Wait. This is how you send. Oh, wait. So what happened to the music business, Andrew, as you were getting more and more involved in this public and the educational stuff? Did the music business sort of wane, or were you still doing that?
I mean, there was a significant amount of denial in at the time when the music business. So we should maybe make a distinction between the music business and the record business.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Because the record business dominated the music business at that time.
At that time, I used to work at Island Records, so
there you go.
Yeah.
And there were, in the beginning, I also with Michael Dorff started a conference on digital music called Plug-In. We partnered up with Jupiter Communications.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Which was a darling of the internet era.
I remember Jupiter well. That swanky office.
And we started producing a conference every year at the Sheraton Hotel in New York. And the first couple of years, the record industries would send their digital person to the conference.
Who had an AOL account.
But to answer your question, Rick, by the fourth year, record company presidents were calling us, begging us for speaking slots, because they were trying to show artists that they were like the cool record company and that they got it.
Amazing.
But there was still a lot of naivete on the part of the record industry, and I would say that the record industry blew it. The record industry could have built iTunes, and Spotify.
Yeah, easily.
And they just didn't see it. I remember arguing with the manager of Tracy Bonham, an artist by the name of Tracy Bonham, who wanted us to turn off the encoders that we had installed into the Bowery Ballroom to record one of her shows and stream it. And he was like, people are going to steal that music. They're going to listen to it on the internet. They're going to steal it. And I was like, do you realize they could just buy her CD and put it out on the internet too? And he looked at me. It's like, they can? like there was so much misinformation and lack of curiosity, I think, is the thing that was shocking.
That's the key, I think. That's the key. You could have seen Napster coming. You could have. If you were curious and, really went into what's going on here and how people, artists and creatives like what we're doing now in capturing these stories, how are they doing this and what are they playing at? And you could have seen it coming.
Right. So, now, Billie Eilish is probably the best recent example of a huge artist.
Chance the Rapper, completely online. Right?
All of them. But, what you don't see, and this is important, is that we believed at the time, and this relates back to M.O.U.S.E. too, which is that we believe the technology would create some sort of democratization of the music industry, or new forms of distribution. And so, in those days, if you wanted to be a successful artist, you would play, coffee houses and clubs, and hopefully a record company executive or a music festival like South by Southwest, or a new music seminar, and a record company A&R person would sign you to a record deal, and then you'd produce a record, they would promote it, get it on the radio. That was the model. And then you become famous, and that was the business model for most artists. But today there are thousands and thousands of artists who are never going to get signed to a record label, and may not even want to.
Right.
Who are producing music and distributing it themselves, and making a living. Maybe not a very big one, maybe not millions and millions of dollars, but a living by using the tools of technology to promote their music, to distribute their music, to connect with other musicians, and to be inspired.
Yeah.
And so, we've seen it happen. It's just that you don't, I mean, if you go deeper into the internet, there are all kinds of websites for independent artists, libraries and platforms that have been built for discovery, where you can find thousands and thousands of artists that the record labels will never ever promote or market or sign.
But it's not in droves, right, Andrew? I mean, look, when MTV launched, I remember, oh my God, this is going to change everything that we do. And it actually just made it bigger, right? The pies got bigger.
Yeah, and it's also, but it's also important to remember that the technology changes the art.
You're right. Right.
And not just, but it doesn't happen because the technologist changed the art. The artist changed the art. So the best example I give you is Madonna, who might have been a famous singer-songwriter in a traditional sense. But if it wasn't for a music video and the way in which she embraced it and created a whole persona around it, she would not be the cultural icon that she is today.
That's right.
Movie making, initially, movie cameras, they were not intended to make movies. They were intended to record people on stage performing in plays.
Right.
It wasn't until Eisenstein and D.W. Griffith and others took the camera off the tripod and started moving it around that they created an entirely new medium. Right?
The jump cut.
So it's the creativity of the people with the technology that appears, right?
Exactly. So what you're seeing now is all kinds of artists using TikTok and streaming music and
Twitch.
platforms to basically build new ways to connect with their art. But they're also they're forming new aesthetics, and they're forming new ways to communicate ideas and their perspectives. So this is constantly evolving.
So here you are, you've got all this thing going, you get that 200 person, you wired up the schools, everything else. That was what, 97, 98?
97, and then we got to 2001 and the bubble burst.
We don't remember that, do we, Kyle? We were like, oh, God, what happened?
Well, that was that amazing time where it just, everyone wrote the internet off. I just saw a headline yesterday. Someone tweeted a headline from back in the day that it said,
I posted a picture on Facebook.
The internet
is dead.
Billions of people are leaving the internet, and that was that time. I mean, I don't think any of us who were in it back then really felt it was going away. But I mean, talk about one of the things we've talked about, Andrew, is within agency.com there was this huge sense of curiosity, and there was also a sense of, I guess, a feeling of how lucky we were to be a part of this thing. It seemed like you were very much, you sort of came in it kind of accidentally through the side door, through the backstage door, and had a similar kind of thing. Like talk about that sense of curiosity, or like just the wonder of the era.
Well, we knew that the technology was going to change the world. And we either saw it in industries where you were working for big corporates, and they were asking you to build websites for them. And in some cases they actually wanted a website. In some cases they were afraid of being criticized for not having one, so they asked you to build one.
Very much.
And we used to use that against them so that we could get the sale.
Exactly. But I have to say that I find it more of a sociological or anthropological moment than a technological moment.
Okay.
Where baby boomers and generation that had sort of came out of the post-World War II era, born out of the post-World War II area, coming of age in the 60s and 70s, had sort of taken up all the positions in corporate and political power.
Yeah.
And, human beings are essentially 90% of the time, they spend trying to preserve their position in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like the incumbent telephone companies do not want to see competition to drive the price of internet service down, or are doing much to help reach poor people with internet, human beings are also incumbent and also don't like to be challenged and see their positions threatened. And so when a bunch of young upstarts like us show up touting the internet and technology, they dismissed us.
Yeah.
And they when the internet bubble burst, because the valuations were too high, and to a large degree because there was maybe a little too much hype, and there wasn't enough enough people online and enough business models to support the valuations. They dismissed it and said, okay, this is over. We're still in power. Let's forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
But even though we failed financially as startups, the people who are actually, to answer your question, the people who are actually in the industry of technology or the internet knew that it still was going to change the world. That maybe we failed, our strategy failed around the building of websites and raising money through VCs to, get bought by some or go public.
Yeah.
But that the technology itself was not wrong.
Right.
So, yes, we lost a bunch of people. People lost their jobs. People had to rebuild themselves. Some of the people that we worked with then maybe opened restaurants or became advertising executives or joined.
Some people actually left. I know a couple of our colleagues literally just left the industry completely.
Yeah.
They were like,
and they left the industry completely. Correct. But there was a bunch of us who just kept on going. The person I will highlight the most is Scott Heiferman, who, if you haven't interviewed him, you should.
Scott very well. Yeah, we should. We've been trying to get him on the show. We have been trying.
Yeah, but he started Live Traffic, and then
which we acquired
after 2001.
Yeah,
he started Meetup.
Yeah.
As this idea that was like, let's bring people together because that's what the internet is really good at.
Right.
And he started something called the New York Tech Meetup, which was his own meetup on his own platform.
Yeah.
And it actually became the largest tech meetup in the world. It still is. It's got 60,000 members.
Crazy.
And 4 or 5 years ago, Kyle, it would sell out the NYU Skirball Center once a month. 800 people would show up.
Yeah.
And it was selling minutes.
To watch a dozen companies do 5-minute demos.
Yeah.
And it still does them. It doesn't do the meetings anymore because of COVID, obviously, but they still do their monthly meetups. And there are now over 2,000 tech-related meetups in New York. FinTech meetups, healthcare tech meetups, environmental meetups, you name it. But people like Scott were, true believers in the way in which the internet would democratize society in some way. That's the good news, and I believe that. And conference on the intersection. Following the music conference, I started a conference called the Personal Democracy Forum, which tried to bring people together from politics and government together with people from technology, senators, congressmen, and there was this big belief that technology would be a force for good. And I think that inherently, I think a lot of us still believe it can be. Unfortunately,
so you and I
hijacked.
Yeah, you and I talked briefly before we started the show, and you said, we had these wide eyes and thought it could do good, and it's taken a bit of a turn. I mean, I would love to hear from you when you thought that shift happened. Was there something that precipitated it? Was it just that a handful of companies grew a massive audience? Like, what was the shift, and how do you think it happened?
To be honest, I think we underestimated I mean, there were all kinds of platforms. So Meetup, and when Howard Dean was running, there were meetups and blogs. There was no YouTube. There was no social media, but communities were being formed, and people were making small donations, and there was, blogs were distributing information to people, and it was sort of
grassroots, right, Andrew? I think that's the big thing. It was very grassroots.
It was very grassroots, and then
Yeah.
YouTube. I don't know if you remember the macaca moment. There was a senator.
Yeah, sure.
His name now escapes me, but
South Carolina guy.
yeah, or was it Virginia? But anyway, who used the word macaca, and it went on viral on the internet, and then Barack Obama, obviously got elected.
Yeah.
Those are Barack Obama got elected, by the way, when MySpace was still around.
Right.
Which seems like ages ago.
Ages ago, right?
Right.
My
So,
goodness.
but I think, to answer your question, I think we underestimated the way in which social media might be used by the negative forces of political discourse and corporate power.
I call it the vocal minority got a platform, basically.
Yes. Well, it's important for minorities to have a voice.
Absolutely right.
But we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about the design of these platforms in order to ensure that human values, human rights, that empathy was an important piece of the puzzle. And by the way, if you don't have government regulation, this is historic, whether it's in the chemical industry, the oil industry, healthcare industry. If there's no government regulation, then things go off the rails, because the pursuit of capitalism and the pursuit of return on investment sort of outweighs any concerns about the collateral impact of those platforms.
And I think that's part of it. I think here is when the social media companies started a lot. I mean, even today, a lot of the regulators and the lawmakers don't really understand the capabilities these platforms and algorithms actually have.
Yeah.
And so how do you
more and more of them do.
Which is good.
Yeah, I used to say that, politicians don't know the difference between a server and a waiter. Joke.
I like that.
And it's still relatively true if you look at the Senate and you look at the age of the people in the Senate. But they're a little bit more and more aware, and some of them are actually, exploiting it. We did not anticipate that. We always dreamed that there would be a politician that would understand the power of social media to build new ways to connect with his or her constituency, or their constituency, which is probably the better way to say it. And there are examples of people who tried. I mean, in the early days, beyond Barack Obama, even at the grassroots level. But none of us thought that somebody like Donald Trump would exploit social media to spread the kinds of lies and misinformation that has now become a disease. Not just his, but he's more of a symptom in my mind.
Yeah.
Of this.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
So,
hang on, we just lost your picture, Andrew. It went black. Same with yours.
Let me see. I don't know why. Hold on. Let me get back to it. Here we go.
Yeah, there you go. Ritesh, can you still hear us?
Yeah, I think he just disappeared for a minute. That's why he just said he'd be right back.
Oh, okay.
So,
wait, we can't. Wait, hang on.
There you are.
My internet was a little crazy, so I just moved routers. So
I'm glad it's not just me.
I'm back.
Okay, we started with streaming music out of nightclubs in New York City in the 90s, and here we are 25 years later, and it's still
it still doesn't work quite well. So
I was right in the middle of the solo, damn it.
No. By the way, Andrew, how did you stream? I mean, because those were crazy days, right? How did you figure out?
It was the first festival that we did was actually just digital pictures uploaded to the web with an army of volunteers writing text underneath the pictures, like of such and such an artist is on stage at Irving Plaza or at the Knitting Factory or at Arlene's Grocery or wherever, with the bottom line.
Right.
The second year, Apple gave us a bunch of computers and helped us pay for ISDN lines.
Wow.
Which I spent months getting Verizon to install into these clubs. And ISDN lines were basically dedicated copper wires.
That's right.
And then figuring out how to get them plugged into the computer. And so we started streaming actual moving images using a technology called CUC-Me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Gosh, remember that thing?
Yeah.
And then we dirty capitalists that we were, we jumped ship and left Apple and got a huge $250,000 sponsorship from Intel. So instead of becoming the Macintosh New York Music Festival, it became the Intel New York Music Festival. And we switched all the computers to PCs.
Oh, that's so funny.
And started putting encoders in, and started streaming. I don't even remember the technology, but it happened pretty fast within 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And so, now, we have, I just cut my cable. Was really late. Shows how much of a Luddite I am. But I finally cut my cable television subscription and just switched over to YouTube TV to save myself $100 a month. And it's a DVR in the cloud, any show, anytime, anywhere. Streaming has just become pervasive.
Look at what Disney Plus is doing, what NBC is doing with Peacock. So they're all getting.
So that's the media industry or the industry. But in terms of Zoom, which I think we're all exhausted by. The technology, even though we're having some technical difficulties today, has become prevalent and ubiquitous.
Yeah, things got accelerated. Well, do me a favor, talk about the transition from those early days and what you learned in trying to connect the dots between commercial and government and communities and what did you carry forward?
So after running Personal Democracy Forum for 7 or 8 years, we started seeing that some of the people showing up at the conference on the role of technology in society were not government, but actually nonprofit or social civic entrepreneurs that were building tools that were helping people navigate the world in what would be traditionally in ways that traditionally would be provided to them by government, but was not being provided to them by government. Whether it's making it easier to apply for food stamps, right, or technology that would help identify where there were environmental hazards in your neighborhood, or whether there was, which are the better schools, how to rate them. There was an army of people that were just sort of using the technology to try to make the world a better place. At the same time, Kyle, Scott eventually resigned from being on the New York Tech Meetup board, and they asked me to form to become the chairman. And so I was at every one of these meetups, and every time we did these 12 demos on the stage at NYU, I started noticing that 2 or 3 of them were not for-profits, but non-for-profits that were building things to try to make the world a better place. One of my favorite examples is a small company called HeatSeek that basically created a little $3 device that sits in people's apartments, intended for low-income people, that measures the temperature of the apartment every hour and provides a log. And the reason why that's important is that very often landlords in poor neighborhoods don't provide heat by law, which is required. And so, and what happens is that the families get sick, the parents get sick, they lose their jobs,
great
they don't go to
idea.
school.
Yeah.
So what happens is they go try to get the landlord to court, and the landlord has a fancy lawyer, and it's usually the tenant's word versus the landlord's word, and they don't get anywhere. Well, this little device created a log that simply they take the log and they bring it to court and they say, well, here's the history of the heat in our apartment. And so,
fantastic idea.
But I can give you example after example like that. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head that the New York technology community, the same one that there's 200 people that showed up 20 years ago, was still highly empathetic and thinking differently about technology than Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
That they weren't just thinking about how am I going to get my, be the next Twitter or the next Facebook and make $1 zillion. They were actually had moved on from that. And so I, at that point, sort of realized that there was a community of people that needed to connect and be, and work together to support each other around this concept of public good technologies, what I call civic tech, or what we call civic tech. And so my partner, Micah Sifry, not the partner in Digital Club Network, but the partner in Digital Club Network, we co-founded Civic Hall together. And we launched space on, I took a sublease from First Dibs on 5th Avenue and 20th Street. We opened up and immediately people started showing up, and our model was very interesting. Was not a co-working space. It was a community space. So you could come and use any of our desks, use our Wi-Fi, drink our free coffee, come to any of our events, but you had to take your stuff home at the end of every day. You couldn't leave your stuff on any of the tables. And you couldn't come with more than 6 people. You couldn't bring your whole office. You had to bring some subset. And we started having people show up, and they started bumping into each other. And next thing you know, they started working together, initiating new projects, and sort of pushing this idea, which now, by the way, there's a Civic Hall in Toronto that's gotten started. There's one in Bucharest that's getting started. There's one in Brussels. In Paris for a while. I don't know if it's still open.
And what's the mantra on the Civic Hall? What was the sort of, what's the
basic theme is the basic idea is to use technology for the public good.
Okay.
That's
and how is it funded? Is it government funded? It
got funded by, no, it's not government funded. It got funded by some of my own money first. I sort of seeded it philanthropically. And then we got some support from Microsoft and from Google, foundations like the Ford Foundation, Robin Hood. The biggest supporter actually was a foundation called Omidyar, which was Omidyar. It's now called Illuminate. And then we had a model where people would pay a modest fee to be a member. And so, if you were using our space full time, you'd pay $500 a month. If you were using it part time, maybe $250. So that generated some revenue. But it was never intended to be a profitable, to make money. It was just, the goal was to get it to be sustainable. And it got enough traction that we convinced the city to help us build this new building. If you give me a second, I can show you a quick picture of it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great. Yeah, this is just amazing, isn't it, Ritesh? It's like
incredible.
I feel like there was a whole nother world of tech going on.
That we know and didn't really care about, right? It's like, hold on a second, there's people doing good stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny, really, because I was just watching, the BBC News is on behind me all day, and they had a feature yesterday on Facebook, and how it has actually been used for bad. They just shut down the army in Myanmar and their Facebook presence. I had no idea. Myanmar today, 50 million people, 27 million of those people are, the only way they access the internet is Facebook.
Wow.
And so the ability for people to then use that platform to seed misinformation like the army did on Facebook to those 27 million was very easy because it's the only thing they have.
Right.
That's the internet.
So they just shut it down. That's amazing.
Frightening and fascinating in both times.
I'm totally embarrassed because I can't find it at the moment.
Oh.
But anyway, anybody who's interested should just go to civichall.org and you can see it.
Okay.
If I was using my phone, I would show you a picture because it's actually being built. It's already up. It's on Irving Place and 14th Street, and it opens at the end of this year.
Okay.
I'm very grateful that that we didn't open in the middle of the pandemic or before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And the model will be social good. Is there a qualification process or?
So anybody can be a member.
Okay.
At the moment, because COVID, we shut down our space in Flatiron for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But the way the model works is you basically apply and you tell us why you want to be a member, what you're trying to get out of being a member, and what you're willing to give.
Good.
You know, to make it a sort of an exchange of empathy and interest.
And I assume there's a big education component.
Yeah. So the Civic. So we think of our members as learners, makers, and sharers.
Oh, that's great.
Those are the three kinds of, types of human beings, and we ran workshops and trainings and did things to sort of help people understand ways. Many of them, it's not just for people who are interested in who are techies. It's for people who just recognize that technology has an impact on what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
We ran a volunteer program where we matched technologists with nonprofits who needed help because they needed an app built or a database merged or a website or something fixed. And after they went through the volunteers worked on solved their problem. Many of them came to us and said, "I want to learn how to do this stuff myself." And so we started giving them training. We didn't teach them how to code. We taught them things like human-centered design. We taught them about how to make themselves more secure using, how to protect themselves online. But when we went to the city and proposed the building of a larger building, this is probably the most important point. We insisted on creating a digital skills training center for underrepresented populations, and this goes back to the walking into Washington Irving High School. The technology community still is way too white, way too privileged. Not enough money is going to women. Not enough money is going to Black or Latino entrepreneurs or members of the LGBT community. And so we felt that if we were going to have the opportunity to build something in the heart of the New York tech community, which Union Square, you could argue, is the heart.
Right. Yeah.
I think one agency used to have an office on Park Avenue South, right?
Yeah, we were 665 Broadway, just right near there.
Right near there.
Yep.
That there needed to be a kind of a center for connecting underserved and underrepresented populations with the tech community, give them digital skills.
That's great.
And help them get jobs and make the tech industry more diverse. And so, to answer your question, sort of the overall goal is obviously, you said social good, civic good, but I would argue that if you want to fix the way in which technology has now created all these external negative effects, there's three things that have to happen. The first thing is we need government regulation. There needs to be rules of the road established for the way in which these technologies work and how the companies that own these technologies operate. And many companies now recognize that it's important that it will build a bigger market or a better market if there's regulation. So that's step one. Step two, there needs to be a reckoning among the white computer science driven privileged classes that have built the technologies to date about the fact that many of the things that they built have had negative impact. Maybe they didn't intend it, but that's how it's turned out. I'm sure the people who helped start Uber, Travis and others, didn't think that yellow cab drivers would be killing themselves over, right? I mean, obviously that's maybe a little bit of a cheap example, but you get my point. But the third piece, and this is the one that's so critical, is that unless people of color and others who are most impacted and affected negatively by these technologies, if they are not at the table building the technologies of the future, we're going to repeat the same problems.
The cycle will continue. You're right.
The cycle will continue.
Yep.
You're right.
And so if you want to make the world more civic, and if you're going to use technology to try to make the world more civic, it has to be designed by as diverse a community of people as possible.
Yeah.
And so if we celebrate diversity of our country as a melting pot of the world, that same should be true for technology, and everybody should take responsibility for it. So we're hopeful that our model on Union Square will be copied by others and replicated in ways that will have impact 10, 15 years from now, as the technology evolves. And hopefully some of those people will run for office. Some of them will actually know what a server is.
Lawmakers, yeah.
Or we'll figure out new ways to make laws.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right? Well,
Do you think, Andrew? Do you think Bloomberg's impact on this stuff in New York City was good, with all the stuff that he was trying to do?
Well, I mean, I think there were many things that Bloomberg did that were very important. He was a big cheerleader for tech. He obviously got Cornell Tech to get built, and that was But Cornell Tech produces 80 computer, or maybe 100 computer science student graduates a year. It's a drop in the bucket.
Right.
City University of New York produces more computer science students than all the other private schools in New York combined.
Wow.
Amazing.
The challenge is that many of them don't get jobs working at Google or Facebook or Microsoft or Oracle or Salesforce because they're not connected culturally to the dynamics of how those companies hire. Those companies still want to hire people from Stanford or from Cornell. But to answer your question, Mike did lay some very significant groundwork that helped put New York technology community on the map. And I think many of your listeners and the people watching this heard about Amazon's troubles in New York, trying to make New York a second headquarters.
Right.
I think actually that was a milestone event, because there was always a little bit of this argument between New York's technology community, and Silicon Valley, that New York was never going to be Silicon Valley. That Silicon Valley was the only place. If you're going to start a startup, you have to go out to California.
Right.
And once Amazon sort of announced that they were going to come to New York, even though their project failed for political reasons, it signaled to everybody that New York was a must-place be, the place everyone had to be. Yeah. It was a must for you to have an office in New York. It was a must for you to be engaged in New York. And so it's no longer that argument no longer holds water for two reasons. One is that companies like the New York Times or even Citibank think of themselves as digital companies now. They don't think of themselves as banks or newspapers.
Yeah.
The second reason is that New York is a far more diverse population.
It is. You're right.
And California has a lot of problems as a result of their homogenization of technology, and so I actually think New York has a role to play as a leader in diversifying the technology community and trying to help solve some of these structural issues that we have that are not just technological, but political, sociological, anthropological, that, the battle between the industrial age and the information age continues.
Yeah. So let me jump in. Let me ask you a quick question. We've got less than a minute left, and we got to get back to our day jobs.
Sorry.
Andrew, this was fascinating. So
let me ask one quick question.
Yeah.
Any chance we're going to see you running for mayor? I think with all these ideas.
No, sorry, I'm not going to. I'd love to. I'd rather help someone do a better job than actually worry about day-to-day running for office. But there's an argument to be made that that the system of democracy was designed in the agricultural age, and it's actually obsolete in the information age. So I'm really interested in talking to people about how to shift power.
Well, maybe that's what we'll do the next one.
From the few to the many, and maybe help build an army of people come after me to try to make the world a better place.
Andrew, this has been amazing, and I'm sorry we could do this for another hour.
Yeah, this is
incredible stuff. So thank you so much for joining.
I'm flattered you took the time and that you took an interest in. And Kyle, it's really great to reconnect.
Yeah, likewise.
And I will be now religiously tuning in.
That's great. And go subscribe on YouTube. We need.
I will subscribe on YouTube, and then let me know if you need help connecting with any other folks or ideas of people.
Okay, great.
People, you know, to join. You should have been there.
Great, awesome. Thank you.
And when as soon as the COVID crisis lifts enough and the weather changes enough, Kyle, give me a buzz and we'll get together for a coffee and catch up on everything else.
Love it. Sounds great, man. Thank
you, everybody.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Talk to you soon.